We're going to shift over to our first session, which is about homeless encampments. So litter is a major generator of trash in our public space, but so are homeless encampments. And so we're going to talk about some interesting projects underway that are making an improvement in all that. We have 4 different folks doing presentations, and we're going to hold our questions until the end of all 4 of the presentations. So you can hold your question or put it in the chat. Either way works great. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Bart Potter with the Washington Department of Enterprise Services. And Mr. Potter, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm happy to sort of be the first off in this particular panel. I expect to learn a lot from the speakers who will follow me. Okay, it was saying something about my video. I don't really have a video, so I just have plain old-fashioned slides. And I will share my screen.
That is looking great.
Okay, good. Thank you. Today, I will be talking about our fairly new contract for encampment cleanup services. And then I'll take a little time to talk about our new solicitation for litter pickup that we hope will be in place early in 2023. For a quick overview, we established the master contract for encampment cleanup in January. And our goal is to help customers meet the ongoing need. It doesn't appear that encampments as a whole are going away. Even the ones that do go away pop up in other places. So our contract is intended to help governments of all sizes and state, local, etc., to meet the ongoing need. When I get done talking about encampment cleanup, I'll demonstrate how little I know about litter pickup services. And again, I hope to be educated by my fellow speakers today and tomorrow. This is a new procurement. We hope to launch early next year. And we hope to provide at least some solutions for beleaguered public agencies. For our encampment cleanup, why did we create a statewide master contract in the first place? Basically, it's so that public agencies don't have to go out and procure those services on their own. And it was to establish a vendor pool in every corner of the state. We did significant outreach to the small business community, and we had some success. We have 5 of the 7 vendors on the contract are small businesses. 2 of our vendors are minority-owned companies, and one of our vendor companies is owned by a minority woman veteran. And I'd like to point out that the 2 vendors that are not small businesses who were awarded contracts are quite large, which is great for us. They're able to work in all the regions of the state and both contract complexity categories. So far, and we're still building, we've been able to supply contractors for Kitsap County, Clark County, City of Stevenson, City of Everett, City of Yakima, Washington State Department of Transportation in multiple locations in Seattle, multiple locations in Vancouver, and other places that weren't specified as to Seattle, Vancouver, or whatever city they were in, and also the Department of Social and Health Services. And anecdotally, we know that there are intentions or not yet scheduled operations in several other locations. Our contract pays a lot of attention to public and employee safety. Our contractors are certified in hazardous waste handling and disposal, bloodborne pathogens, and steep slopes. They learn how not to fall. And that's for our category 1 sites, which are the larger and more complex of our sites. Our crews on our sites work closely with the hiring jurisdictions, project manager, and law enforcement. There are certain things they may not do, and again, this is for public safety. They may not engage with encampment residents that might remain on a site after it's been vacated. Our crews are instructed to stop work immediately and contact the project manager if they find firearms, explosives, or suspected contraband, or evidence of methamphetamine or fentanyl labs. Unfortunately, fentanyl is becoming a player in encampment culture, I guess you'd say. And our outreach and marketing continues, and we're very happy to talk about this contract with you today and are looking for every opportunity to get out the word. And if you need more information or you'd like to help us get the word out about this state contract, certainly like to hear from you, and there's my information. Every litter bit hurts. That was the slogan back in grade school when every year we had a film about litter prevention. And there were commercials on TV about litter prevention. And I recall these very well, and it worked on me. I don't litter. I just don't. I feel terrible if I were to have littered and cleaned up after ourselves, myself. And my agency, the Department of Enterprise Services, is very happy with this prospective contract for litter pickup to play a role in keeping America beautiful. We numbered it 18522. Our number one goal is to find vendors for litter pickup on public properties and communities across Washington. And really that means to find enough vendors that we can cover Washington for all the jurisdictions that might want to use this contract. In order to do that, we'll almost certainly have to do multiple awards to vendors in 6 regions of the state. Who can use the contract? State agencies, cities, counties, ports, and other special districts, higher ed, public schools, and 501c3 nonprofits. And I have an asterisk by nonprofits there because although nonprofits typically can use DES statewide contracts, there are some circumstances under which they cannot. And I did not research whether or not this contract will be usable by nonprofits. So I will be researching that. And if you're interested, I'll be happy to share that information with you. So how do we find enough vendors? Well, the first thing is to do a regional award that we hope can be a fine enough sort of arrow so that we can reach into the communities, into the counties. And there's the world famous DOT region map. I think we might have modified it for a previous contract slightly. So we're going to be trying to identify litter picker-uppers, and how do we do that? By the way, litter picker-uppers, I think that's going to be the official name of the contract when we get around to naming it. We'll do a WEBS search of commodity codes. WEBS is our solicitation management tool. All statewide solicitations go through WEBS. And using just the 3 commodity codes used by Amber Smith of the Department of Ecology in a recent statewide solicitation for highway litter pickup. Those 3 yielded 107 vendor hits. When I plugged in some of the more or less related codes that we used on the homeless encampment cleanup, I think I got to something like 370 vendors in Washington. And those are just the ones that are registered in WEBS. And I wouldn't be so naive as to think that there may be plenty of vendors out there that don't know that they should be registered in WEBS. We can use an RFI, and we usually do on virtually every contract, which is a request for information to the vendor community, in which we can gather various data about their companies and including their small business status. Word of mouth from you in the community, whether you are from a government entity or a nonprofit, or among the people involved in the litter prevention community. And finally, we have what we call sourcing teams. What is a sourcing team? You, yes, you. Sourcing team is typically.
Art, I just want to give you a 2-minute warning here. So.
Thank you. I'll
Sure.
get done. Sourcing team typically is made up of potential customers and subject matter experts, and we certainly have plenty of both in the room today. Another name for it might be advisory team, because that's simply what it is. So if you are interested in helping to educate me as I build this contract, use the chat function right now and let me know your interest in serving on the sourcing team. I think it's pretty easy, 1 hour long meeting to start with a couple of follow-ups as needed. That sounds like that hair restoration commercial. 1 initial consultation and 2 follow-ups. Or use the chat function right now to indicate your organization's probability of using this litter pickup contract. And I'll be happy to entertain questions when the time is appropriate. And here is my information again. And I look forward to talking to all of you. Unfortunately, there's no lobby for us to talk in after we leave this room, but here's how you can get a hold of me. And thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thanks so much, Bart. And maybe if you could put that contact info in the chat, and you can either answer some of those questions in the chat, or we'll circle back during our Q&A session after other presenters. So thanks so much for that. We are ready to shift over to the city of Vancouver, Washington. We have Julie Gilbertson with the Talkin' Trash program. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm going to share my PowerPoint. Can everyone see it, or can I get a nod?
Looks great.
Okay, wonderful. So I appreciate the time and opportunity to talk about this program and service. My name is Julie Gilbertson with City of Vancouver Solid Waste, she, her pronouns. I will do my best to describe our program, but also have a little connection to encampments. But to start us off, I'm going to talk trash like we do in solid waste, but specifically a program that offers low barrier employment and housing through litter cleanup work. Before I do the connection with Talking Trash, I think it's very important to ground this community litter cleanup initiative and partnership that we have with our funding, because this funding and this program is through our solid waste ratepayer dollars. And it's important to align a program and the funding with its nexus with our services. Our solid waste utility in the City of Vancouver's mission is to protect public health and the environment. And we do this by assuring high quality and affordable garbage and recycling services are available to our residents and our businesses within Vancouver. That's the core of our work and majority of our focus. However, we acknowledge that our comprehensive service contract doesn't meet all of the city's unique needs or our community's desires and needs. And where this comprehensive contract doesn't meet that or fails to say fully deliver to our most vulnerable community members, was never designed or intended to, we recognize that gap and we pilot programs. We have secondary services or agreements to address community needs, such as litter cleanup, abatement services, as well as supporting our unsheltered and our homeless community members. So I'm excited to talk to you today, but wanted to ground that in its nexus with solid waste. So where are we at today? I want to take a moment to lay the groundwork to what got us to the Talking Trash program. And it started with community conversations and acknowledgement of pressures and issues that our community was faced with. To start, back in 2016 and 17, Vancouver is one of the first communities to formally recognize and declare a housing crisis. We were seeing community members at risk of losing their housing insecure, or transitioning from being housed to now having unsheltered housing or transitory housing. In addition, we had heard from our community and seen the impacts of employment, whether that is entering into the employment workforce through gaps in employment opportunities or inability to retain employment. And then over here, unrelated to some of those aspects, we also have a litter challenge. Like many growing cities in Washington state, our community has grown very dense and is increasingly denser as a jurisdiction. And as more people come together in smaller spaces or the same spaces, more litter is accumulating. So these are three concerns our community had, and in conversations, roundtable discussions with our community, we attempted to tackle some of the problem. Granted, it's not a solution that addresses or fully is the solution to every or all problems, but it attempts to address a three-pronged approach. And that program and vision that we had was to address litter through creating an employment program and targeting specific individuals at risk of housing insecurity or actively not having housing with a lower barrier employment opportunity. We recognize that some of our most vulnerable community members that are on the street or in their vehicles or couch surfing or other, oftentimes are in those situations because their employment status is shifting or evolving, or because they can't enter the workforce because of some barrier. So what we did with our community was identify a willing nonprofit partner and a scope of work under an agreement. And it's, to be very clear, we have a directed grant agreement, which is different than a contract where you have an RFP or solicitation for services, a different form of solicitation, but it was the method that the city chose to approach a partner to help us meet a scope of services that we were looking to fund. And outlined in front of you are some of those tailored components of the service. We recognize that part of the challenge with retaining employment or finding gainful employment is having a flexible employer. So we wanted to design an employment program that focused on the work. We needed litter collection to occur within our community, and we had unspent funds that were previously going to be used for our community restitution crews. In some jurisdictions, those are known as community correction crews, worker offender crews, or other. We couldn't get crews, we couldn't hire them at the means of which we needed, so we were reallocating our funding for that. But back to the parameters of the program, 20% of the program's intent and design is spent on employee development, that personal development, training, soft skills, the supportive, social supportive or services, that case management services that an individual might need when they're re-entering the workforce or re-entering a housing situation, to really identify the root causes of what were the housing insecurity or employment barriers that led to a cycle of instability in future. In addition, we wanted to target employment opportunities for our are housing insecure and homeless. So the program identified a nonprofit homeless service provider who had a willing group of individuals that were looking for work, but had oftentimes been discredited for work or unable to find work with an employer that would work with them within the constraints of their living conditions. In addition, it was important that this program offered training. Like I mentioned, that 20% of time is spent and tailored, very specific to the individual's unique needs. Anything from driver's license certification, former employment certification, personal soft skills, helping employees learn the skills that they would need for any future employer that they were seeking or an industry that they were wanting to join. So with that, we take these problems and we have community conversations and we take input and feedback from our community. This idea was born for this program we now call Talking Trash. So Share Vancouver is our nonprofit partner, and we've partnered with them since 2017 to provide the Talking Trash service program. And Talking Trash is the name of the program that the original crew members and staff within Share have come up with. And to date, it's well known within our community. Whenever the name Talking Trash is mentioned, it's often associated with litter, with Share Vancouver, and positive feelings towards a response to litter cleanup. So really going back to the focus of this program is to respond to litter. That is our initial intent, and address litter community-wide. So that is across Vancouver, but also foster housing connections and a low barrier employment opportunity, predominantly at this time for those who are at risk of losing their housing or experiencing housing and not having housing. The core of the program at this time includes 6 community cleaners, 1 crew lead, and a supervisor. It is funded at that level of staffing. The service areas include public spaces. Those are city properties, city buildings, other public parks and paths, trails, sidewalks, medians adjacent to sidewalks, with a daily focus on priority sites. And the crew is set a route at the direction and input by the city. The supervisor and leads or drivers on the crew are following a series of locations and stops that are known to the city to be frequent for litter or illegal dumping. And I want to pause for a minute. When I mention litter, I'm speaking of the true trash, right? The types of litter that is ejected from vehicles, intentional or unintentional, unsecured loads, or really intentional illegal dumping, which we've seen a notable increase across our community throughout the duration of the pandemic. And so this has become a very important service, and the areas that they service the city are a secondary support to many city operations and programs. So where city crews have primary jobs in fixing the water lines, assuring our streets and signals are clear, some of the secondary work that they rely on Talking Trash to do is to ensure that they can get out there and do their job, or when they need to focus on other seasonal aspects of their work, such as pavement projects, they know that there's a secondary service provider out there in our community to assist them. All of this is one of the highlights and hallmarks of our program is that this service and our third-party service provider acting on our behalf to pick up litter is well connected to the city across many departments. They're helping us, but they're also so connected to more than just our public works and solid waste program. They support our operations and connect regularly with our police department, our code compliance, and more recently, and notably in the last 2 years, has been our HEART team. That is our homeless assistance resource team, comprised of a suite of members that focus on outreach and services and carrying out the city's work to address homelessness within our jurisdiction. Talking Trash is known not just to city staff and different departments across our city, but our community and our electeds. They're known by other jurisdictions as well. Oftentimes I'm asked by WSDOT or the county or other colleagues, hey, can we get in touch with them too? So I'm happy to help describe how we built this program in essence so that other jurisdictions or partners might be interested in looking at this service. One of the changes that I do want to acknowledge with the program, I talked about the nexus of this work with solid waste, is that anytime we set out to carry out a vision of our community or even a need that we have within our jurisdiction, there's a natural course correction or time and influence can change the direction of a program and service. And we've seen that pretty notably during the COVID-19 pandemic, and also as the city has embarked on carrying out a homeless response plan. So I want to acknowledge that the program started as addressing litter and providing cleanup and creating a more livable community and healthy community. But it has grown from that. And one of the key places and ways that our program has grown is in serving our most vulnerable community members. Now that we have a homeless assistance resource team and an actual plan that the city is carrying out, we're seeing more intentional outreach and effort. And this program is one way in which the city has been helpful to be more inclusive and reaching out to our unsheltered. Evidenced by that is in our early COVID response as a jurisdiction, we wanted to focus on continuing to maintain sanitation while our operations crews had to have heightened focus in other areas of the city. So our Talking Trash crew members were out working in our community, helping us monitor litter hotspots, helping us with emergency operations locations that we had set up in the early days of the pandemic to assure that sanitation concerns were not being neglected or paused during lockdowns or other impacts to services. One of the
Julie, I'm going to jump in with a 3-minute warning. So
thank you. One of the moments of clarity that I appreciate the pandemic bringing is the essential need that everyone has, no matter their dwelling situation, to have trash services. And this is where I talk about the beginning of our presentation today, that comprehensive collection contracts, cart-based service, dumpster service works for the majority of our community, but it really doesn't serve those that are in a transitory nature or those without means, but that still generate waste. And in the during COVID lockdowns, when everyone was asked to not move to prevent the spread, what we saw was an accumulation of waste within encampment sites or within where residents were staying and parking in their vehicles, and a need for disposal. And so the Talking Trash program requested, and we granted them permission to go forth and provide a bags service to reach our community, most often those in tents or encampment situations, with a bag service. And what that ended up becoming was a continued and sustained service for those in our who are actively presently unsheltered and homeless. In addition, they provide visits to areas that are, Vancouver has a watershed throughout the city and trail system and dense network of park systems where people can be, where it can be difficult to see or know that someone might be needing service. So they do provide outreach and a bags service. And that touch and that interaction with just providing a bag service extends a positive connection, a recognition and human dignity to someone in a place of need, and helps bridge their pathway back to finding connection to our community. It's been shown that 17 positive interactions are needed for someone to take steps forward at minimum. And so with every attempt in delivering a bag service, they have then become a peer support and build rapport with those in our community. This effort, the bag service, has been incorporated as part of our homeless response plan. In addition, we've asked Talking Trash to continue to support some sites that were born at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, but have been sustained as part of a response to unsheltered homelessness within our community, including providing support and outreach at our safe park sites where RVs and cars, individuals can safely park and shelter in their own vehicle. Talking Trash goes around and provides connective services there, as well as sanitation sites, which are dumpster hand washing stations, but just monitoring for litter in the presence of these areas, and stay safe communities, which are new communities where we've transitioned formerly encampment locations into secured shelter services for up to 20 temporary type dwelling units. In addition, all of these opportunities provide an example and a model for employment. And actually, Talking Trash members of the 6, 3 members are currently within one of these types of communities. So it's an opportunity to then recruit new members to join the program and to build that employment opportunity and path forward into from surviving outside to then thriving in a future where they're housed and employed.
Right. I'm gonna have to jump off to our next speaker.
Thank you.
But we'll have a chance to ask some questions either in the chat, or we'll have definitely some time in our Q&A session. Thanks so much, Julie. I could keep listening much longer. So I appreciate you sharing that. Next, our third speaker in this session is Harold Odom. One of the important parts when we're talking about services for people experiencing homelessness is to have people with their own lived experience that have put some serious thought and energy into thinking about how we work better to meet their needs. And so without further ado, Harold was previously with the Lived Experience Coalition in Seattle, currently working with the Seattle King County Housing Authority. So Mr. Odom, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's King County Regional Homeless Authority.
Oh, I screwed that up.
It's okay. It's okay. We have the same initials. I'd like to thank Julie for her presentation. I'll reach out to King County Exec's office because they're doing the same type of program. Let me just go a little deeper on that. When I was homeless for almost 15 years, there were parts of being homeless that just really are down and out disgusting. How do you mitigate those things and have yourself live a better life? And people who are homeless think about that, because unfortunately, there's not a lot of services out there for us. And this is before pandemic. We found out during the pandemic, services were curtailed to those people who were more like those outreach workers that were out in the street. And unfortunately, when you have 7% of the population, Black and brown, and you have 37% of them suffering homelessness, there's something out there that's more than just missing or falling through the cracks. It's service providing through systemic ways and not through a cultural and equitable way. Trash is something different. Rats are your biggest enemies. If you can keep rats away, you keep the health department away, you keep neighbors away. In Seattle, in every neighborhood, there are rats, but the homeless populations, they seem to grow faster and have little packs going around, they seem like they're singing, going through the bush, because they're so happy there's so much trash around. When I was homeless, I lived with a group of people and we stayed in the same place for almost 5 years, and then we moved away because it just got unbearable for us neighbors, and it wasn't enough. We didn't have enough people to clean up. We moved to another place, did a little different, and we stayed there for almost 9 years. No one bothered us. We were able to get rid of our trash. We had city workers, county workers giving us trash bags when they weren't supposed to, and really ignoring us because they did not have a problem. No one called in on us. But it's hard to do when you're homeless. There's apartment buildings, you have to ask them if they can throw trash away. You have to hide your trash within a highway pickup crew, and you have to keep the rats down. There's that shingolingus, I think it is. That's devastating to a person. I mean, it's instant diarrhea, and it's from a rat having a piece of some type of your food and you've eaten it. There's just so many things that are out there that can hurt you. But as far as trash goes, just specifically trash, before hand sanitizer was around, I think every camp I know of has a 5-gallon bucket of soap and water for people to wash their hands. And if they don't, you kick them out of your camp because it spreads disease. Homeless camps, whether they're sanctioned or unsanctioned, have some rules. We know which ones are going to keep us safe and keep us clean. And we also have a system that tells people you can't be homeless anymore, especially the youth. We need them to be out of homelessness quicker and faster than maybe someone who's aging and needs to be in maybe a senior citizen home, and we need that also. But trash mitigation is the rat mitigation is a public narrative that has to be put out there so people can know we're not criminals, we're not deviant, we're not drug users, we're not mental health or behavioral health people. We're just human beings that have been exposed to homelessness so long, those things develop. I didn't go into homelessness as a drug addict. I developed drugs, meth habit in homelessness. I don't have an excuse for it. It's just, it was a thing to do. There's nothing else to do. Give a population of people nothing to do, no way of getting out of homeless. They fall into something that's unfortunate for them, looked at by society as deviant behavior. You see people acting out on the street. They're not acting out because they're crazy. They're acting out because they've been exposed to homelessness so long and they're unsheltered. That's what it does to people. Trash is one thing that has to be looked at. There has to be containers. There has to be, we have a purple bag program up here in Seattle, and I think it's starting in Tacoma, where different city lights is responsible for here. They pass out purple bags, and then they're collected twice a week. Trash containers are essential. 500-gallon trash containers. If you put that in an unsanctioned camp where rats can't get to it, people will keep it clean. People will dispose and get it to you. It's just you have to give them a chance. The theory of change in King County, if you're going to do something for somebody, build a population, build a new this or new that, bring them to the planning and bring them to the table to discuss how it's to be delivered. And I think that's being done in Seattle and a little bit in King County now. And we see a great deal of success with it. I was just at a place called Ruby Chow, and it's where RVs parked by the SeaTac airport. That place used to just be terrible for trash, and people, it would get swept every other month because people were not keeping themselves or their surroundings clean. A different team went in there and they said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to help you with a carbon footprint. And the amount of rats that you see around there are very few, going back and forth between the airport. I sit down there for an hour the other day and I saw 5 rats. And I just want to know, because I sat down for an hour a year ago, I couldn't keep count of the rats that kept going back and forth and going into the motor homes. And I was asking people, how do you deal with that? I mean, isn't it kind of scary? I mean, I couldn't stand it having a rat around me, if I was in my tent. I had a dog for 9 years, and I was blessed with that dog because he kept me safe from the rats. But there is just things people put up with when they're homeless that they don't think about. And trash is one of them. So I like to ask people, how can you better assist people with trash? You could carry 5-gallon or 50-gallon black trash bags in your car so you can hand them out to people. Hand them out to them instead of complaining about, hey, you have trash over there. Hey, give me some bags because I don't have enough money to go get any. And the government's not giving me any. Let's put our minds together, think of things differently. How can we mitigate something and not be an accuser of it? I always tell people, let's look at this. King County collected, I think it was 800 and something million tons of trash. And that's like 1/10 of a ton of trash per person. In this little sample area, 731 people collected, or the navigation team collected, I wish I could remember this. My slide deck was lost this morning when my ex-employer decided to disable my email and my stuff. So I'm not blaming them, just saying, but I remember a lot of things. So, but I think it came out to be almost 1/3 of a ton for those 731 people. If you look at it, you're going, why is that disparity there? Well, Julie mentioned it, and I think other people have to mention it and get a hold of things and get after your city council, mayors, or whoever to put the pressure on illegal dumping. Homeless people don't go out and collect used paint. Homeless people don't go out and collect used and unpainted, unvarnished paint equipment that now has been rolled up in carpet and old paint on it just for the heck of it. It's illegal dumping. They don't have cars out there that well, some of them do, that are run down, and you can run the VIN number and find it belonged to somebody just down the street. You put that out to Seattle Police Department. They have to shut their mouth because they're not doing their jobs at protecting the homeless. The homeless are human beings, and we need protection from people who illegally dump, shoot at us, their garbage, their waste, their defecation, and their children's diapers. It's not who, but it's like, why do you put a person who's already down and out vulnerable to the rest of society because now we have a new kicking dog on the block. I tell you, that could be you because more crime is done by those people who have homes, vastly more than anywhere else in this country. It's not the homeless population. At the beginning of the pandemic, those people who had homes, domestic violence went up to 17%. I wonder how the carnage in those houses and how the pain and the trauma that went on. Couldn't imagine that. But now being homeless and thinking all of that as well. You know, we have to think of homelessness as not people who just discard trash, but they don't have any way of having someone pick it up. You know, I had to pay, when I had a home, had to pay an extra, I don't know, it was $35 a month because we had 2 kids, a dog, you know, me and the wife, we had tons of trash. We had to pay for an extra pickup a week. People don't think about that. They don't think about their own ways to compare it to homeless people. But I went on about my lecturing. I just like to look at people, have people look at homelessness in a whole different way. What do you do with your trash? And I put this to Boeing. I caught Boeing employees throwing their trash in the big dumpster and then going parking in. Their security company, who's Phoenix, they can't do anything because it's outside of the gate. They don't even report it. They just make a log of it for their log. I asked if I get a copy of it. Wow, no. But they see it. Ways I start taking pictures of them. It stopped. But why do that? Why can't you just fill your own garbage on at your own house? Because then you can whine and complain about how dirty the homeless are. It's just one of those things that when you bring someone who's been homeless to the table, they're going to tell you, your stuff stinks too. You just throw it away differently. But that's not the vast majority of people. Most people take care of the garbage in their lives in a humane and safe, equitable way, and they give to charities. We just have to find those people who are not living in the best way possible. Maybe they'd be going through something in their lives, but don't blame it on the homeless. Homeless didn't just go out there and say, oh, I'm gonna be homeless for a day, 2 days, a year, 15 years. No, when I came out of homelessness, I had 2 social workers who said, Harold, don't you want to get out of here? I looked at them, told them that, you know, just my derriere, because they were joking with me. They came back, you know, I work with one of them now. They were serious. I was just thinking that no one really cared.
Harold, I'm going to give you the 2-minute warning.
2-minute warning.
Yep.
My first job was cleaning honey buckets. And I had no problem doing that because I wanted to get out of homelessness. I could not stand it. It's not a life of luxury. It's not a life that I wanted, but I got to that point where, you know, drugs just not doing anything were more important to me. Give people a chance, help them with their trash, carry around some hand sanitizer, some hand hotties, and 50-gallon black trash bags that you can hand to people so they can help themselves with their trash. And then bring in the forums like this and ask them what's going on. How can we really help you? Go into their camps. They're not that dangerous, you know, and find out what's going on with them. Because human beings are living out there in defecation, in urine, in spots where they shouldn't be. They should be homed. So that's all I have to say. Thank you, Garrett, for having me.
So glad you could come, and we've got a question and answer session coming after our next speaker. So I know there's at least a couple questions in there, but thank you. Really appreciate a little anchor in reality there. We are going to shift over to my hometown of Tacoma, and Sadie Heminger is going to talk about Tacoma's Purple Bag program. Sadie.
Thanks, Garrett. Let me share my screen here. Okay, you seeing that okay?
Almost.
Here we go.
Perfect. You're good to go.
All right, I'm going to talk about Tacoma's Purple Bag Project, which started in our, well, it started in Seattle, and Portland started doing it originally. But here in environmental services, we started to notice a lot of more camps pop up on some of our open spaces and our, you know, natural and critical areas. Coupled with, you know, homelessness was the #1 issue from a 2020 community survey that people were concerned about. So as we started seeing more and more camps pop up in some of our spaces, we kind of were looking at ways that we could implement something that would help make an impact in cleaning up a lot of the trash. Some of the things we also looked at were some observed camps on a lot of our ES managed properties and how that interfaced with our equity layer, equity map. A lot of the camps, as you can see here, were in lower opportunity areas in the city of Tacoma. A lot of the purple ones are where we were seeing more and more camps pop up. And then the CDC recommended that, which the city began to follow with homeless camps, that they stay in place and not be moved so the spread, would not go out into the community further. So we started to see more and more established camps staying in spaces, and we saw a greater need for improved sanitation and debris removal in some of those spots. We also saw a lot of damaged vegetation. This is a tree where someone dug out underneath and was staying, in a pretty unsafe spot underneath this tree. There's a lot of slope erosion and a lot of human waste and garbage, bacteria. Some of the risks of the community we noticed, we operate under an NPDES permit, which is a National Pollutant Discharge and Elimination System. So stormwater and water quality is high on our radar. So there's a lot of inherent risks with living outside. Here's a couple photos of some steep slopes that we manage that have had a lot of landslides historically. You can kind of see like vegetation gets denuded, the tree roots are kind of undercut, and then we get a lot of debris going down some of our slopes as well, which is really difficult to get. Our contractors have to spend a lot of time when the loose debris goes down the slopes and they have to rope off, and it's a whole process. And then down below on this slope is actually a critical wetland area. So, and then people were using some of the streams that flow directly into the Puget Sound as washing stations and toilets and things like that. So as we began the Purple Bag program, we wanted to focus on those kind of more natural areas first and bring the bags out to communities in those spots, but also recognize the need for trash and debris that we're seeing just loosely on the street around camps. We needed to bring it out into the city streets as well. Just some examples of some of the debris piling up at some of the camps around town. So we tested out regular waste pickups at some of our camps, as to help reduce the harmful impacts of improperly disposed of items, reducing blight in the neighborhood. And then it also, as bags were being passed out, it helped our contractors who come and pick them up delineate what is trash and what are items that folks want to keep, because sometimes there can be disputes there for sure. Some of the local regulatory support, like I said, we operate under the NPDES permit, which says that we have to protect the public from the effects of erosion and landslides, maintain healthy and functioning ecosystems, and protect healthy ground and surface water. And then we have a Tacoma Critical Areas Preservation Ordinance. So we have to kind of make sure that those ecosystems in those critical areas are maintained. We also wanted to make sure we're using equitable service delivery. And so our two pilot sites, one was in an open space, and then as we branched it out into the greater community, we started in an area in Hilltop, which is a historically underserved area. There were 5 5 camps set up in Hilltop at the time. So we made sure that we started there because there was such a need for sure. So we coordinated with city departments, talked to city council. We did a presentation to the Pierce County Homeless Coalition, sent out mailers for the house community and created a website. We also set up, a purple bag program within our 311 call center, which is now called See Click Fix. So when people out in the community see a purple bag that needs to be picked up, they can just put in a request and we'll send one of our crews out to go grab it. We set up an infrastructure in the camps, so we would go and pass out bags and interact with folks. And then have, if it's a Friday, we would set up a set day so people know on this day bags are going to get collected. So the results for our ES pilot, we did 12 weeks of handing out bags and 281 purple bags were collected. There's a 71% return rate on the bags that we passed out to getting the bags collected, and collected nearly 20,000 pounds of garbage and debris that wasn't spread throughout a large area. It got, bagged up and just set in a certain spot. So our contractors had to spend a lot less time going and picking those areas. They could just come and stop, grab the bags and go. And then we did the Hilltop expansion where we passed out bags out to camps that are on the city street. And did that also for 12 weeks. We got 213 bags collected, over 63,000 pounds of debris over the 12 weeks. And through meaningful engagement with some of our outreach specialists, 12 people were relocated or housed through outreach and engagement efforts. Some of our next steps, we'd love to expand beyond our pilot sites. We've already started doing that. The city is hiring more outreach workers. So the more people we have going out into the woods or into camps, the more that we can get the bags passed out. And we've worked alongside our contractors really well to have them also pass out bags and get systems going. And then we also are focusing on ecological restoration as sites get cleaned up. Like right here, here's a before the pilot started. We had a camp up here and it was a huge area up top, but a lot of the steep slopes and trees and things were suffering. And this guy actually got relocated and got housing. So as that happens more and more, then we can come in and do some of our ecological restoration work. And right here we did, a lot of erosion control and planted a bunch of native trees. And we can start restoring some of the areas that have suffered. Just a couple more photos of work being done by some of our, I think our WCC crews. And that is it for me. I'm looking forward to questions. Tried to breeze through it pretty quick, but thanks for having me.
Awesome, thanks. And I think we can start in with some questions. I didn't see any just for you right there, Sadie, but I'm gonna start maybe back with Harold. One of the questions was about encampments and was asking about how litter bags get placed. Do they get placed in one spot for pickup, or are they sort of scattered around? Is that something you want to take, Harold?
Good question. Says like Sadie was saying, their purple bag. We have the HEP A project who does most of the handing out of trash bags. They get a block and they'll find out where people can dump their trash, where would be a good place for people to, at the end of the block, middle of the block, or the end of it. There has to be an understanding by both parts. City Lights likes to go at the end of each block, but if there's a place like a little container that people have built for trash, they'll go there as well. So there's someone who passes the bags out to the individuals. Someone will take them, fill them with trash, and go to the end of the blocks, whatever. Other people won't. I mean, we don't have as good a return as Sadie does. I mean, I wish we had that 71%, ours more 60%. And as we go out, and I'm out there, I try to encourage people to do that. It's something that, you know, I would have liked to have when I was homeless, because it really does help. So I hope that answered the question. There are teams that go out and hand out, and then there are teams that pick it up.
Thanks, Harold. And this next question, I think I want to toss out to sort of you government folks. So there's lots of questions about where the money comes from and kind of how your program works. So Bart questions, you know, basically you guys are setting up contractors to do work for other folks that have money available. Maybe kind of clarify if that's correct. And then Julie and Sadie, if you can maybe talk just briefly about the cost of your program and maybe a little bit about funding.
Well, that is correct. Contract services are paid for by the government, the state agency or local government entity, and how they acquire the money, how they budget for it is, we're not indifferent to that, but it's not part of our contract. And Charles had a good question about a court-ordered cleanup on private land. And my take on that would be that if the county, in this case Grace Harbor County, is paying the bill for that court-ordered cleanup, they could hire a contract vendor. The site itself wouldn't seem to me to need to be on public land.
Cool. And if all the panelists want to turn your camera on so we feel like a proper panel, that might be nice for folks. Julie?
I'm happy
or
to
Katie?
step in and share. I dropped some stats on the total program costs, disposal, labor and services in 2021 for you to have a full picture. So under $300,000 at that time, and currently it is fully funded by our garbage ratepayers. So the city, through a collection contract, receives a city fee or a franchise fee. And of that franchise fee, with council's direction and support, we are funding this grant agreement. We fund the disposal costs for this program. So over 290 tons were collected last year. That was roughly $38,000 in disposal costs, which is quite significantly higher than in previous years. And then the program itself was about $254,000. We sunsetted a one-time grant from the State Department of Commerce that was supplementing expansions of the program, expanded benefits such as childcare, other informal benefits that are designed to address the barriers to getting the employees to work, but also recognize that benefits are unique and should be a part of an employee's employment package, if you will. In this case, is a need of the community members who are doing the work for us. But you had, I also want to acknowledge that private funding could also be a source of funding. Our current grant agreement, we're in a place of evolution where we're seeking, because the services have expanded far beyond the original scope and nexus with solid waste, and they're now branching out into supportive services for our unsheltered. We're at a time of evolution in us reassessing the funding being solely borne by our solid waste ratepayers or our solid waste utility, and now presuming that we'll be going forward with a renewed agreement with co-funding from our general fund through the HEART program. But private partners such as business districts, downtown associations, one-time donors for, say, vehicles or other assets that providers can carry out the work. There's opportunities when partnerships and when this work is when others see the brilliance in this work or see this program and service, they want to get on to the train, right? They want to join that and expand it. So trying to scale that service. Did that address your question, Garrett and others in the committee?
I think that's helpful. It's interesting to me, and Tacoma, I think, is somewhat similar in some originally funding coming through environmental services, traditionally not organizations we think of as doing kind of direct service to people experiencing homelessness. Sadie, did you want to talk a little bit about that?
No, I was just gonna say I appreciated that this program did start in an unconventional way, and typically in Tacoma, Neighborhood and Community Services does most of the homeless services and gets all the funding for provider work. So I love that our ecologists came up with this program, and it's now expanded into Neighborhood and Community Services, who I know that was a question in the chat about which function of the city performs the program. So it has grown, and it's becoming crossing departments, and it's taken a little bit of collaboration. But now the city, or the department that typically runs a lot of the homeless outreach and services, is taking it on and expanding it. So that is where it sits at the moment.
Thanks. We have about 13 more minutes. If folks want to raise their hand with questions, they can do that as well, or put them in the chat. Julie, there was a question about how you guys handle biohazards. And I guess any of you can kind of chip in. It sounded like you had some wording in yours as well, Bart, about sort of expectations around that. But you want to talk through that a little bit?
Certainly. Well, when I use the term litter and what we expect talking trash to do, I'm using more vernacular like true trash. So litter, cups, other, but they might also encounter waste that can have bloodborne pathogens or others, caps, needles, other types of non-traditional household or encampment related trash from a person living in a space. Do ask that the talking trash crew member get a basic level of training, including bloodborne pathogen, but we do not require them, because they're acting on behalf of the city, to remove hazardous waste, biohazards, beyond the scope of what they've been trained to do. And if it raises to the level, say, abandoned motor oil, antifreeze, or unidentifiable, potentially household hazardous toxics that were orphaned in the right of way or public spaces, then they call on our operations team. So that's where this interconnectedness is. They're the superficial first touch. And then if it raises to a level of needing higher safety training or other protocols, the city is still the appropriate jurisdiction or entity to respond and clean our public spaces. To make sure also from a stormwater and surface water protection that if there was a spill or that it's an unidentifiable hazard, that they're not putting themselves at risk. Also just want to acknowledge that the data from this program is very robust and rich, and that has been insightful for our program. One of the changes that I saw was I call on the community to pick up litter when I get complaints or reports from the public. Oftentimes, the presence of a needle or a cap in the community can be very jarring for some of our community. And so I can call them out directly, go out and respond, and they'll tally data for me and report back monthly on how many caps, how many needles they pick up. And that paints a picture, and then we can see trends over time. So I enlist them to do that kind of tracking on types of litter or even illegal dumping. In some cases, as was mentioned by Harold and others, it's quite clear that housed individuals or other, say, contractors or other generators are just dumping on or near sites, whether there's an encampment there or not. Sometimes it helps us to paint a picture of the landscape of where behaviors are happening in our community around waste. So their reporting back to us includes locations and types of material. Does that help?
Thanks. Another question that is in, which was about growing the size of the programs. I think often we start these as pilot programs. And then has there been work done either in Vancouver or Tacoma to look at growing it kind of size to the actual need in the community? Like, do you have a sense like, well, we currently spend $200,000 a year on this, but what we would really need to clean all the garbage up would be X. And is that something that's part of the conversation, or are you still working in a world of limited resources?
Do you want to start in Tacoma? Or
Sure. I think I mean, for a while, we had one outreach worker in Tacoma, that was me. And so it was just me going and handing out bags and, trying to be the person to do it all. So we definitely started with limited resources, absolutely. And now I think our outreach team is up to 4 folks. It's growing, and the amount of hands and outreach and service workers we can have out there handing out the bags, the better. But yeah, we are finally expanding past the pilot stage into kind of a more mainstream kind of buy-in with everyone and all of our departments to continue with the program.
To speak to your question, I think that this is one program that we are definitely seeking to leverage and to posture for growth. But also I want to caveat that this is not a solution to every problem that it's attempting to address either, and that our jurisdiction has multiple opportunities to explore ways of addressing litter in our community, depending on where the litter is, the generator of that litter, and or encampments, mitigation of hazards associated with encampments, as well as service to those in the encampments. One of the pieces that I've noticed with this program is it started as a pilot. We like to pilot to permit it kind of thing, or have permanent pilots in Vancouver. And one of the quick aspects we learned at the beginning in 2017 was it was a part-time program, but people wanted full-time work. They wanted gainful employment that could lead them into a path of sustained housing and sustained springboarding into different longer-term employment opportunities. So that was the first change in our evolution of our service. And the next is that with a homeless assistance resource team that is generally new and maturing within our city, and a homeless plan that is also being implemented at the beginning of its implementation stages, I suspect the program will also pivot in response to some of that. Where we are at is in recognition that other jurisdictions, like the model that we've built, can the model sustain partnership with outside sources such as private parties or other jurisdictions like WSDOT leaning in to support. So we have to resource and plan accordingly. And the one key thing I think for us is that we have a relatively short deck of nonprofits who are qualified to take on this work. So there's needing to be time on the part of local government to invest in the development of our nonprofit infrastructure and partners to be able to grow this and sustain this. So a business plan and building out staff capacity is some of our shorter term goals to address, how do you grow this in a sustained way? And also consider the labor constraints that are happening at every piece of the labor market that this employment program is also impacted by. So that's where we're at.
It's a question from Heather asking a little bit about challenges when you're crossing different property owners, right? We often have encampments that are on tribal land and City of Tacoma land and WSDOT land and even private Burlington Northern Santa Fe land. Are those challenges to work with in terms of how your program is allowed to operate?
I might take liberty at speaking to that, because as a local government in Vancouver, there's no clear line, a visible line of where a jurisdiction boundary is. And you can have state, county, or other special district port property within your jurisdiction. And it's very confusing to the public. They just want to see litter wherever it is picked up and responded to. But it is challenging, and also for our service provider to deliver a service only on city property, because we're using city funds to do this work. So Heather, this is where local government partners have to work together to understand where our boundaries are, what property is ours, and what we are responsible for maintaining. because we're not responsible in Vancouver for maintaining WashDOT's rights of way, which include the freeway on and off ramps, highways, and even county parks that connect within our systems or our jurisdiction. Those invisible lines make it quite hard. Federal lands as well, tribal and other jurisdictions. So how we work together is this is where the city sets the route for the service provider in our jurisdiction, where we say where you can go, where you can't go, or where we encourage them to bring questions or bring reports of litter to us so that we can assess, is this our responsibility? And when it is not, the proper thing to do is to relay to that relating jurisdiction. That's where partnerships are key across local governments and municipalities is, hey, I got this complaint for you. Because it's within your jurisdiction. So we have to work together.
Just have a few more minutes. There's another couple questions that we're talking a little bit about. How did you put these programs together, right? So you've got city or county councils, you have activists in the community, you have the people experiencing homelessness, you have the nonprofit providers. Can one of you maybe talk a little bit about how you sort of were able to get a program going, bringing in those different, like when did you bring those different groups in to help sort of get buy-in or direction on the program? That's you, Sadie, looking at you, but you can conclude.
Well, I wasn't actually hired with environmental services yet when the program started. I just kind of took it and ran with it. So I know that our folks, I think in the slide it showed that they did, present with the Pierce County, the coalition, homeless coalition. They did send out mailers. They did engage with the community and the homeless community. And I think that was a question in the chat there too, was did we go out and actually talk with people and ask them if it would be useful for them? And overwhelmingly, yes. And yes, people appreciate the bags a lot, and they appreciate giving, having been given a sense of like, hey, we care about you, want to clean up your area, and taking ownership over their spot, checking in, developing relationship and rapport with folks. And the bags are really sturdy. I know, Harold, you talked about rats, but they're really sturdy bags, so the trash doesn't spill out or can't get eaten through super easily. I know rats will get through anything, but so yes, we did talk with folks in our open space areas where the program started, and it went really well. So we're just continued going with that, and in our other locations since then, overwhelmingly people have really appreciated the service.
All right, and again, there's bios for everybody and hopefully some links folks have put in how to contact them in the chat. We have 2 minutes until break, and then we're going to come back at 2:15. Harold, do you want to give us any words of wisdom as we head out of the session?
I would say I don't have any words of wisdom, but the last question, it's imperative that you bring people in, service providers, small and large. Government has to have the buy-in from the government. I went to the last 3.5 years building up King County Regional Homeless Authority. You talk about having people buy in from the county, city, all sort of ways. You have to have weekly meetings. I say, so as many people you can get to come to a weekly meeting, be the better. Lived experience, we do our policy 6-week meetings, and we invite everyone that we can to come up with a policy that's different than the ones that are out there not working. So bring people in always.
All right. Thank you so much to our panelists and for the questions and engagement. And we're going to take a 15-minute break and see you all at 2:15. Thanks, everybody.
Cool.